Hi, if you're watching this video, you're watching the last lesson on linear relations. In this lesson, we'll be talking about how to get the linear equation from a graph. In the previous lesson, we took everything we knew about slope, x, y, and so on to make the equation from a table. Now we're going to take the graph and make the equation from that. So, just a quick review. We know how to get a linear equation from tables, right? We see how much the y changes and divide it by how much the x changes, right? That gives us the slope. So in this table, we see that as x goes up, right? We see that it's going up by 2. Y is going up by 4. Now, common mistake, you would say, oh, it's going up by 2. No, minus 2, you go up by 2 to 0, and then up by 2 to 2, right? Here, we're going up by 4, right? Up by 4, up by 4, up by 4. So it's staying constant. The change is staying constant. So you take the amount it changes by on the y side, the y is changing by 4, and divide it by how much the x is changing by, 2. That gives us the slope, right? So we know that our slope will be 2. Right? Y changes by 4 every time x changes by 2. So m, in our equation mx plus b, m is the slope, right? The change in y is 4, the change in x is 2, so 4 divided by 2, our slope is 2. Remember, m is our slope. So if we were to start writing our equation or our expression out, y equals, well, we know m is 2, so 2x plus whatever b is, right? Once we get m, we can now find b. The way you find b is by just picking any point on the chart and substituting the values in. So here, I used 3 and 4. I used this set of data here. This data set right here. Right? So I now know m is 2. Right? So I'm going to replace the m with 2. Right? And I'm going to use this data point. So x is 3. So I replace this x with 3. And y is 4. Right? So I replace this y with 4. So now I have 4 equals 2 times 3 plus whatever b is. Right? Well, bed mass, 2 times 3 is 6. So now I know 4 equals 6 plus something. What can I add to 6 to make it 4? How do I add to a number to make it smaller? Well, you can add a negative number, right? And that's what we did. If you added negative 2 to 6, well then 4 plus negative 2 is 4. 6 plus negative 2 is 4, right? So you can say b is negative 2. So our equation would be y equals 2x minus 2. And we can check our answer. And this is the good thing about linear algebra. Yeah, it's hard and it's got quite a few steps. You can always check your answer and never be wrong, right? Okay, so I think my equation is y equals 2x minus 2. Okay, to prove myself right, I pick another spot. So instead of 3 and 4, I'm going to pick 2 and 2. Right? I want to pick 2 and 2. Okay, so my y is 2. So 2 equals 2 times, what's my x? 2, okay, right? Minus 2. We do bed maths. 2 times 2, 4. Minus 2, 2, right? Because that would be 4 minus 2. 4 minus 2 is 2. It matches. It matches, right? We can do it again. Let's do 1 and 0, sure. Okay, my y is 0, so 0 equals 2, right? That's our slope. Times, I replace my x with what I have here, 1, right? Minus 2. Bed mass. 2 times 1, we do multiplying first. So 0 equals 2 minus 2. Is that true? 2 minus 2 is 0, so it matches. So we know we did it right, right? You can check your answer, so you should never get these questions wrong. How do I do it on a graph, though? How do I get this equation from the graph? Well, first off, remember, to find the slope of a graph, you take any 2 points, right? You can use any 2 points to find the slope of a graph. So here, I'm using this point, skipping this point, using this point. So I'm using these 2 points. How do I find the slope again? Hopefully you remember that you do rise over run. So we have the points 4 to 6 and 8 to 14. To find the slope, you find the rise over run. What is the rise again? The rise is how much did the y change? When you go left to right, how much did the y change from point 1 to point 2? So on point 1, we have a y value of 6, right? On point 2, we have 14. How much did it go up by? Right? Well, it went up by 8, right? If you add 8 to 6, you get 14. So we know our rise. Let me use blue instead to match the colors. So we know our rise is 8, right? Because it went up by 8. Okay, what's my run? Well, my run is how much did the x change by? The x went from 4 to 8. Okay, well, I went up by 4, right? I went up by 4. So my rise is 8, my run is 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So my slope, right? My slope should be 2 because rise, how much did the y changed by? 6 to 12 is 8, right? And my run is 4. 4 to 8 is 4, right? That went up by 4, and I divide them. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So my slope is 2. So my equation so far starts out as y equals 2x plus b, right? Y equals 2x plus b. Okay. Well, now I have my slope. How do I find b? Right? How do I find b? I know our slope is 2, so our equation should be y equals 2x plus b. What's b? Oops. So using rise over run, we find our slope, and then we can use any point. You can pick the same point, one of the same points you already used to find your slope. It doesn't matter. In this case, I used the first point again, right? I used 4 and 6, my x value, my y value. So now I do my substitutions. Y equals mx plus b. I know my m is 2, my slope is 2, right? And then I substitute my x value here. So it's 4, so that's my x. And I substitute my y value here, right, which is 6. So now I know 6 equals 2 times 4 plus b. Well, BEDMAS, 2 times 4 is 8. So 6 equals 8 plus b. Well, to add something to 8 to make it 6, you'd have to add -2 or take away 2. So you could write the equation as y equals 2x minus 2. Y equals 2x minus 2, just like before. This graph is the same data from this chart, right? It's the same data. So y equals 2x minus 2. And that's how you would get the equation from a graph. So another way to find b, there's an even easier way. Another way to find b is to see where the line hits the y-axis, right? Called the y-intercept. In the previous lesson, you may have recalled me pointing to b and saying, that's the y-intercept. And the reason why it's called that, it's because the y-intercept is where this line hits the y-axis. This is the y-axis. This is the x-axis. So where does this line, what y value does this line hit the y-axis? Well, it hits it at -2. And remember, I said the plus b was the y-intercept. So the line hits or intercepts the y-axis at -2. So our b is -2, right? The line hits the y-axis at -2. So -2, where's our b? That's another way. It doesn't even take math. You just find where the line hits the y-axis. So just like with tables, we can check our answer, right? So we think that the equation is 2x minus 2. And we know it is, but let's test it out anyway. You can just take another point, punch it in, right? So instead, I'm using 8 and 14 instead of 4 and 6. And I plug in 8. This is my x value, right? This is my m value. And this is my y value and my b, right? Well, 14 equals 2 times 8 minus 2. 2 times 8, bed mass, right? Do the multiplying first. 2 times 8 is 16. Minus 2 is 14. It works out. So I know my equation is right, right? So for linear relations, you can check your answers to see if you're right. You don't need an answer key or anything. And so you can just pick different rows or pick different points. Check to see, does my equation give me the correct y values? If they do, you did it right. So the good thing about linear algebra, even though it is a bit tricky, you can check your answers and see if you're right. If you don't get the correct y value, if, for example, you got an equation and this was, you thought, oh, okay, this is y equals 2x. Okay, let's see if I'm right. Well, plug in x and y. Well, 6 equals 2. And then what's my x? 4. Well, 4 times 2 is not 6, so you know that that's not right. So you can check your answers. All right, let's do a little bit of practice. What is the equation of this chart? All right, so pause the video and figure it out. All right, so this is the way I like to start questions with linear algebra. Okay, so hopefully I gave you time to pause the video because I'm going to solve it. So y equals mx plus b. I like to write the equation out. Write it out. I know it's extra steps, but it makes it easier. Okay, how do I find m? I'm looking for m. Well, what I do, again, I pick 2 points. I like picking middle points, so I'll just pick middle points. Now, some of you may like to work with the 0 part. That's fine too, right? It doesn't matter what points you pick as long as you're consistent. So I'm going to pick this point and this point. I need to find my rise and run. So this point is 5 and 10, right? And this point is 10 and 15, right? 10 and 15, right? Okay, well I went from, sorry, let me just make this a little bit more clear. There you go. I went from 10 to 15, right? My rise is my change in y, right? So how much did the y change by? I went from 10 to 15. So my rise over my run gives me my slope, right? Gives me my m. Oops, not run. There we go. Rise, 10 to 15 is 5, right? Run, well, my 5 went to 10, right? My 5 went to 10, so I went up by 5. Okay, well, 5 divided by 5 is 1. So my slope is 1. My slope is just 1. So I have y equals m is 1x, right, plus b. Now, some of you may know this, some of you may not. If you only have one x or 1 and a variable like that, you don't have to write the 1, but I won't dock marks or anything if you write 1x. Okay, so we have y equals 1x plus b. Okay, how do I find b? Well, I just take a point on the graph. I can take this point, this point, this point, this point, this point. Doesn't matter. I'll pick this point. No, yeah, I'll pick this point. Why not? Okay, so this is minus 10 as my x value and minus 5. Okay, so my x value is minus 10 and my y value is minus 5. I replace my values. So y is minus 5, so I have minus 5, right, equals 1 times x value is minus 10, right, plus b. Well, minus 10 or negative 10 times 1 is negative 10, right, plus b equals negative 5. How do I turn negative 10 into negative 5? Well, I could add 5, right? If I add positive 5 to negative 10, I get negative 5. So b must equal 5. Right? So then my equation should be y equals 1x, because we know our slope is 1, x plus 5. Now, if this process was a bit confusing, pause the video where you think you've gotten lost and just rewind it and watch what I did, because it's just the same steps every single time for linear equations. So if you can do it once, you can do it every time. All right, try this one. This one might be a little bit trickier. So pause the video and see if you can solve it. All right, hopefully I gave you enough time. You may have noticed something, right? These dots don't line up perfectly. Now you know that this is 6. I like to pick points that land nicely on their points, right? These guys land pretty nicely on their points. So I'm going to pick this one and this one. That's far apart, but we can still find our rise over run. So step 1, pick 2 points. Write them down if you need to. So we have -4, and that's a 3. -4 and 3. Okay, here I have 4, right, and 9. All right, next step, find the slope. You find the slope by doing rise over run. Okay, so I went from 3 to 9. Went from 3 to 9. Okay, well, I have to add 6, so I went up by 6 on that one, right? So 6 is my rise. I went up by 6. Okay, I went from -4 to 4. Okay, well, that's a distance of 8. -4 to 0, which is 4. Then 0 to 4 is another 4. So that's 4, a distance of 4 here, and a distance of 4 here. So that's 8. So my run is 8. All right? So my rise over my run is 6 over 8. Uh-oh, that doesn't divide nicely. What can we do now? Well, you can have a decimal or fraction as your slope. That can just work just fine, right? So you just go 6 divided by 8. You could say that that's just 0.75, right? Or you could just simplify it as 3 over 4. And both of these work as a slope. Both of them work. It's totally fine. You could keep it as a fraction and simplify, or turn it into a decimal. That's fine too. So we now know our equation or expression should be y equals, I'm going to use the decimal. You don't have to, but 0.75 x plus b. Right? Or it could be y equals 3 over 4 x plus b. It doesn't matter. Okay. Now I want to see what b is. Now, in the previous slides, I said you could find what b is by seeing where the line hits the y-axis. Okay. Does the line, let me just erase some of this. Does my line hit the y-axis? So I'm going to write this down. So this is my x, right? This line across is my x, and this is my y. Does this line cut into the y-axis? Right? Oh, the line's right here. There you go. Okay. Well, yes, it hits it right there. Okay, what is the y value there? 6. So then I just put 6 there. So it's y equals 0.75 x plus 6. That looks like a b. 6. Okay? And so that's 2 ways in which you can solve it. You can plop in a point and solve for b, or find the point where the line hits the y-axis, right? You can see it matches here. The y-axis is here in our previous question, right? And the line hit there, hit at 5, and b was 5 when we calculated it. So it works both ways. Now, sometimes I may give you a graph and it doesn't show you where it hits the y-axis. Then you would need to solve for b. So try this one. So pause the video and solve this one. All right, hopefully you had enough time to solve it. In this question, I'm going to pick 2 points again. Our equation is y equals mx plus b. Okay, I want to pick 2 points. This guy and this guy. Okay, so what are my points? I have -1 and 4. Right, -1 and 4. Okay, and now I have 1 and 12. So 1 and 12. Let me fix that so it looks a little bit better. 4. There you go. So now I found my 2 points. Now I find my rise over my run, which will give me my m, or my slope. Right? Okay, I went from 4 to 12. Well, that went up by 8. Right? I went up by 8. That's my rise. Well, how much did I run across by? I went from -1 to 1. So I went 1, 2 points. So my run is 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So now I know my m is 4. So my equation now is y equals 4x plus b. Okay, now there's 2 ways to solve this. One's a bit faster because we know we can see our y-axis, right? And remember, the b is called the y-intercept. Does our line hit the y-axis? Yeah, it hits it right here. What's the value? 8. So b must be 8. So our equation will be y equals 4x plus 8. Now let's say you didn't see that. Okay, let's solve it the long way. So we go back to this point, right? Y equals 4x plus b. Okay, then I pick any point. I'll pick this point again. I'll pick this point again. So y is 4. So I'll replace the y with 4. 4. And what's my x? -1. So I'll times it by -1 plus b. Well, 4 times -1, right, bad mass, is -4 plus b equals 4. Right? Well, how can I turn -4 into 4? I can add 8. So b must be 8. And again, our equation then becomes equals 4x 8. Right? So you can solve it in these 2 ways. It doesn't matter. Sometimes I will give you a graph that doesn't show where the line hits the y-axis, and so you would need to solve it this way. So you need to know how to solve both ways, right? And this is not that much different than just regular algebra, so you should be able to solve these. Hopefully you found this class and this lesson useful. If you need any help, please just contact me. I'll be happy to help you, all right? This unit was a bit challenging, but it's important to know because it keeps showing up again and again. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next lesson.